The world is becoming increasingly proficient at telling stories that deny God. As such, we need Thinking Christian to become as natural as breathing. Welcome to the Thinking Christian podcast. I'm Dr. James Spencer. Through calm, thoughtful, theological discussions, Thinking Christian highlights the ways God is working in the world and questions the underlying social, cultural, and political assumptions that hinder Christians from becoming more like Christ. Now, on to today's episode of Thinking Christian. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Thinking Christian. This episode that you're about to listen to is actually a replay. It was a conversation between myself and Richard Beatty last year about New Year's resolutions, how to set them, how to think about them, how to approach them with an appropriate cadence, how to think about progress, those kind of things. I'm replaying it because I think there's some really important points that we made here, and I don't know that I could do it, extremely better from a goal setting and behavioral change sort of perspective this year. So I don't think it's out of bounds what we said last year. I still agree with a lot of it, although in the next episode, I'm going to kind of walk a few things back and try to critique what was talked about in this episode, as well as supplement it with what I've, been, as I've been studying scripture and having conversations and just talking with people and doing my own private devotionals and studies. I think that I have a slightly different perspective to offer this year on New Year's resolutions than I did last year on New Year's resolutions. And so, this episode is an important replay. Hopefully it'll still be helpful and people get a lot out of it this year. But I'd encourage you to listen to the next episode where I sort of qualify some things and then talk about how to go about being transformed as opposed to changing oneself. So enjoy this episode. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody. I know Christmas is coming up. And we're running into New Year's. So these are a little early for New Year's, but I'd encourage you to listen to all three at some point. I'd like to think that I'm offering some insights that I've had over the last year that are really sort of hard won and given to me as I've studied scripture and like I said, had conversations with some really great people over this last year. I am going to to sort of finalize this year on Thinking Christian, we're going to be replaying some of the episodes that I think are particularly related to this idea of New Year's resolutions and some things maybe we should be thinking through. And so those will be coming up as well as replays throughout the rest of the year for Thinking Christian. So if you haven't caught those episodes, you can catch them this time around. And if you have, maybe give them another listen with this context of setting New Year's resolutions and thinking about being transformed in mind. Enjoy the episode, everybody. Hope you get a lot out of it. And again, Merry Christmas. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Thinking Christian. Today, we are going to be discussing New Year's resolutions. We're coming up on New Year. New Year's resolutions are a big part of that. And so we thought we'd have a conversation about how to set New Year's resolutions. Maybe it'll work. And then also provide you with some opportunities that would be spiritually enriching as New Year's resolutions. So
James,
how's it going, Richard?
It's good. Good. I was just going to tell you, you know the history of New Year's resolutions, right?
I do not. What do you got?
It came from the Babylonians. Did you? I'm just reading this now. Historically, the first recorded people to set New Year pledges, later to become known as resolutions. I kind of like pledges too. I think those are cool. Are the ancient Babylonians some 4,000 years ago? So they've been doing that, and how that's really worked well for Babylon. I know. So.
Yeah.
It's just that whole self-reliance thing.
They should have made better resolutions.
That's right. Yeah, they could have too, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today too, making better resolutions, right?
Yeah, I'll admit I don't usually do a New Year's resolution.
I don't either.
I usually just sort of decide at some point when I'm going to start doing something and when I'm not, and then I do it then.
It's really interesting because I know that as a CEO and executive director that I have to set objectives for my organization. Yeah. And I always think of that as almost resolutions in that way, because you're saying, hey, this is what we're going to do this year. Yeah. And that's if I guess if you have that kind of mentality, resolutions could probably be pretty good, especially when you're accountable to others. Like you and I are both accountable to a board, right? So,
yeah, and I think there's a sense in which New Year's could be a good place to start. Now, I will say this: I find the New Year's to be difficult to start something
Right.
for a number of reasons, me personally. And so usually when I think of my New Year's resolutions, I'm thinking around like January 10th, January 15th, if I'm going to actually start something.
Right.
Because, that time period between Christmas and New Year's is so busy. Like I just tend to have other things that aren't normal things, right? You've got a New
Well,
Year's party here, you've got,
right.
whatever it is you're doing. The
And
kids
there's
tend
really
to
good
have
food
stuff.
around too, and
There's really
that's
good
always
food around. So
yeah.
yeah, if you're doing some sort of fitness or nutrition based goal, sometimes that can be problematic. So, I guess the first thing I would say to folks when they're thinking about their New Year's resolutions is don't get stuck on New Year's,
Right.
right? If you're thinking, hey, I got to start January 1st after you've just had, even if you just stayed up with your kids to watch the ball drop, right? I would tell you that me at 45, staying up past midnight anymore, I'm kind of wrecked the next day. Like,
Right.
I need my 10 o'clock bedtime if I'm going to be functioning the next day. And so you're kind of setting yourself up for failure if you're deciding that no, January 1st has to be the thing. If it's going to be a New Year's resolution, it's got to be there. And what I would say is no, like prepare to resolve, right? Like put yourself in a situation where the resolution is actually going to be possible. And,
Right.
and so I wouldn't worry too much, even though you might call it a New Year's resolution. I wouldn't worry too much about the January 1st start date.
Hmm.
That may or may not be a great time for you to do, your resolution at that first time. I just know, again, from my time as personal trainer, right? January 1st generally was not a great day for people to work out. The people I was working out often had a really good time the night before.
Hmm.
And so they'd come in and their workouts were not enjoyable for them. They were, and it wasn't like I was trying to, hurt anybody, but they were not feeling physically well. And so when they'd come in to work out, everything that is sort of torturous in the gym, depending on who you ask, right? um,
Right.
they're feeling that torture that much more. And
Hmm.
so I just think that as people look at their New Year's resolutions, backing them out and saying, what's realistic for me to start this? Do I want to start it? Like I said, if I was going to do and I do have some goals for next year, but I'm looking at them more like end of January, right?
Right. Right.
My kids have a lacrosse tournament out in California mid January, and so it's like, well, that's going to be a real hiccup. But after
Hmm.
that, I don't have much planned that is going to, create problems, and so,
Right.
I'll just hold it off until after that, come back, and then I'll hit it hard. That's the kind of thing that I think we need to be thinking through or that at least my first tip for people who are making resolutions.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's good. I think you invented gradual resolutions. I think that's good. Uh, I'll
New
gradually get to it.
it's New Year's ish. New Year's ish
New Year's.
resolutions.
That's right.
That's right.
It
New
is.
Year's ish.
It is in the new year,
Yeah.
and even though you're going to get
Qualifies.
some of those things done within, what about quarterly resolutions like you do objectives? You say, boy, I've got 13 weeks to work with. I can start this from day one. I can do this week two and go on to
Yeah.
13. Those are kind of nice, and you know, it really keeps things new
It does.
when you do things that way. And
Yeah, I think
I tend to like that method.
I do too. I think the one caveat I put on it is to say if you're going to do those sort of quarterly type goals or add something new every week, I think what you have to be prepared for is, the week before needs to be successful before you add in, something else the second week.
Absolutely right.
And so, again, I'll sort of liken it to weight training, right? It'd be awesome to add weight to the bar every time I went to the gym, right?
It's not going
But
to happen.
right, the reality is if I try to bench 350 pounds or something like that one week and don't get it, I shouldn't
Mhm.
add 355 the next.
Right.
right? There's a very low likelihood that I'm getting that after I've just missed 350. And so you have to calibrate those on where you are and what your success level's been.
Right.
And so, as you're trying to build toward, a greater and greater goal achievement,
Mm-hmm.
right? Moving toward your resolution, my advice to people is pick something that is the bare minimum that you can do.
Right.
Right. So what I would say is something like I did this with my prayer time. I have not been a very good prayer time person. I'm an academic geek. I'll sit and read for hours. Like it's no problem for me. I love doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But prayer just felt like it was distracting me from my reading. And so, you know, I took what I did was I said, no, it's probably not, that's not the right way to frame prayer at all. And so what I started doing was I started reading prayers.
Good.
So lean into my strengths, right? So I'd read
Mm-hmm.
one prayer. I got a book of prayers and I'd read one prayer before I started studying.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty soon, a couple weeks after that, stayed pretty consistent. Then I started writing out my own prayers. I could
Right.
actually sit down again. I'm a reader and a writer, and so it made intuitive sense for me to sort of craft the prayers that I was actually praying. There was something about writing them down that made them more concrete. It kept my
Yeah.
mind more focused, gave me time to really think it through. And then eventually I sort of progressed beyond both of those and started, reading my own prayers and then, saying my own prayers. But
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a very long time. I would say even now, I don't take any more than, 10 minutes of prayer a day. I just it for me, that's a really hard buildup.
Yeah.
And I don't, I really appreciate people who can do it for an hour or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That is in no way, shape, or form where I'm at. And so for me to think though that I'm going to go from 0 to an hour is crazy town,
Right.
right? I needed that progression. And so I think as we look at it from that sort of progressive standpoint, that would be sort of my second tip for people is start with the minimum. Lean into your
Mm-hmm.
strengths and start with the minimum,
Right.
right? Do something you're actually going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't, again, to go back to exercise, don't program, if you haven't been working out, trust me, don't program 7 days a week workouts. I've
Mm-hmm.
been working out since I was 14 years old. It's difficult for me to get 7 days in. I
Right.
usually do 4 or 5,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's pretty good for me. But even then, my workouts aren't that long, especially not anymore. I mean, I do maybe 40, 45 minutes, and that's it.
Right.
And so I think, there has to be that calibration of where you are, where you want to be, and all the small incremental steps that you need to get there.
Well, and I think you hit on one thing as far as incorporating prayer into something that you enjoy doing as well.
Right.
You were talking about prayer. Um, you're about to initiate the 30 days of the gospel.
Yeah.
Incorporating prayer into that reading
Yeah.
is certainly when you pray the gospels, that can be really powerful.
Yeah, it can be. And I think that's a really sort of as we go through those 30 days, that'll be part of what we're doing. And
Yeah.
so the goal of 30 days in the gospel is really put some of these principles into practice, right?
Hmm.
I think, most people, at least I've talked to, they do read
Hmm.
their Bibles during the day at some point.
Right.
But yeah, I talked to about I don't know, 4 or 5 people at my church, and they all said the same thing, which isn't a real big focus group, but it is what it is. They
Right.
they said they'll read their Bibles, but it doesn't feel particularly systematic. It doesn't feel like they're building anywhere.
Hmm.
Right? They're reading sort of varied passages, or they're doing a devotional that kind of hops around. And so it's good, but they don't really get like sort of a sequenced narrative of the scriptures. And
Right.
so the 30 days in the Gospels is really intended to do that. It's intended to say, okay, we're not going to cover every passage in the Gospels. You're going to read every passage,
Hmm.
but we're not going to cover every passage. But what we're going to try to do is give you the overarching understanding of each of those 4 Gospels as we go. And then the plan
Yes.
is actually after that to go into the book of Acts. It seems like a
Okay. Yeah.
natural move
Of course.
to move into the book of Acts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think incorporating prayer into that is going to be an important aspect of what we do,
Hmm.
and trying to make sure that we not only sort of learn head knowledge, right? But I mean the distinction I usually make is when Jesus tells his disciples, "Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them to observe all I've commanded you."
Hmm.
Well, there's a difference between those people learning to observe Jesus and just learning about Jesus.
Right.
And so we're going to try to push to be hearers and doers of God's word, because I think knowing God's word comes from the doing as much as it comes from the reading. And
Yes.
so that'll be in the mix as well. So all of
Hmm.
it should be pretty reinforcing. But yeah, definitely, I think it's going to be designed to, number one, give people a fairly easy way to do it. It's going to be a podcast. And so, 30 minutes a day, while you're driving, whatever it is you're doing. And
Hmm.
then number two, it does set some sort of incremental level,
Right.
right? That it's fairly simple. If you can devote this much time during your day to sort of reading or listening, it's actually just 4 chapters a day max to read through the Gospels in 30 days.
Hmm.
And so that's not that long.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. And as I said, sometimes incorporating your gifts and talents, if you are a writer and
Yeah,
you want to interpret something,
that's right.
and go ahead and do that. While that's like active prayer.
Sure.
Um, as a songwriter, I try to do the same thing. I try to think, boy, what was the phrase? What was the repeat? What's the verse? What's the chorus? What's the bridge here?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it's really kind of it actually makes songwriting even more fun that way too.
Yeah,
But and it becomes a prayer.
I'm sure. Yeah, I think, a lot of these little tips, I think they relate to things outside of resolutions, right?
Yes,
So,
right.
writing, for instance, I've been doing a lot more writing lately. And so I've sort of made the commitment that I'm going to spend at least 15 minutes writing a day.
Hmm.
And it doesn't really matter. I'll just sit down and type. I'll type out ideas, I'll type out themes that I want to cover, I'll type out, ideas, maybe do a paragraph or two, whatever. And I just keep them and then kind of sock them away different places. But it keeps me in the rhythm of writing.
Right.
And it does give me an outlet just to think about things and synthesize what I've been reading or synthesize what I've been looking at. And so, yeah, playing to your strengths like that. And again, it won't be writing for everybody, right? Some people,
Right.
they need just time to decompress. They need a quiet place where they're doing nothing, right? And I think that's great too. But that's definitely not me. But my wife and I are very different in this respect, right? If I need a break from doing what I usually do during the day, I'll hit the gym.
Hmm.
That is not her go-to at all, right? She's much more of the quiet space, quiet time, like please nobody bother me kind of, person.
Right.
And that's just how she recharges. And so I think that you have to know yourself as you're setting these resolutions and make sure that you're not sort of creating a situation where you're putting yourself in the position to change who you actually fundamentally are.
Right.
And doing something that you're ultimately is going to drain you of energy. I think resolutions should actually push you forward. They shouldn't
Hmm.
be holding you
Right.
back and dragging you
Right.
down.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that would be another thought for people is as you're making these resolutions, you know, um, trying to figure out what you're doing in your life that's actually hindering you from moving toward a goal that you're setting.
Yes.
And at times, deciding whether or not that is going to be a hindrance that you're willing to give up.
Hmm.
I've watched much less TV over the last 6 months, right? Because I've been trying to write a book and I've been trying
Hmm.
to get in better shape and,
Right.
those kind of things. And TV is just one of those things like I like watching TV, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like my football. I like movies. I like TV show. Like I like them. But at the end of the
Right.
day, I had to, sort of gut up and just say, is it worth? Which do I want more?
Right.
Right? Do I want to do I want to catch up on this TV show, or do I want to work out, or do I want to write this book? Like, what do I care about more?
Right.
And
Right.
and so those setting those priorities is, I think, as important as determining the resolution.
Well, and that is kind of a fresh way of looking at things too, because I texted my brother. We're a family of New York Giant fans, and the Giants got off to this horrible start this year, and I just said, "Hey, this is going to be more time for me to go cross country skiing this year because I don't have to worry about the Giants.
Right.
I'm not going to follow them.
Right. You don't have to watch. You know the outcome. Yeah.
That's right. So sometimes it's designed that way to say, oh, I could give that up.
Right.
Why not give up some misery? I mean,
that's right. Sometimes it's easier choice than others, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's like that. I think we just have to be cognizant of the things that are sort of stealing away our time.
Right.
I do this organizationally a lot, and I think it applies to individuals too. We tend to talk about our lack of resource.
Yes.
Lack of time, lack of money, lack of energy, lack of. Right. What we don't usually account for is what we're actually spending that time, money, energy, what have you on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, do you feel better after you've just, I would say I don't feel better after I've laid on the couch for 3 hours watching football.
Right.
Now, I enjoy a football game. Right. But I don't feel better. Right. And so, with the wonders of modern technology, I can have a game on while I'm working out.
Right.
Right. That's better. It's better for me to do that. And so there are ways that you can kind of come around that. But the reality is most of the time when organizations tell me they don't have time, resource, money, whatever,
mm-hmm.
I usually say, sure you do. You're just spending it in the wrong places.
Right. And also as I go to Denver to work with the team in Denver once a week. But I have a 3-hour drive there and a 3-hour drive back. And so again, wonders of technology. Some of these podcasts are just outstanding.
That's right.
And you get so much out of that as whether it's a media professional or a business person, or a Christian. If I'm improving my walk and I'm hearing some good teaching, man, that's really good. I just put on James Spencer. So it's...
Well, listen, I mean, it's a really great point. And I think one of the things that I normally raise with people is, okay, so you say you want to read more, right? If you limit yourself to reading in paper form, right, that implies a lot of other things in your life, right? It means that you're going to carve out enough time to sit quietly and read a book. Yeah. And while I have the privilege, benefit, whatever we want to say, like I get to read books a lot and I love it. I do make time for it. I'm usually up really early in the morning and down in my office reading. Right. And it's great. But the reality is I know not everybody wants to do that and really has a commitment to do that, especially if you're just starting to read. And so usually what I suggest to people is this: do you really want to read or do you want to be more informed? Right. Because those are two separate things. Right. Right. And so if you really want to be more informed, now your options open up on the type of media that you could actually listen to. Absolutely. Right. You can do an audiobook, you can do a podcast, you can do, documentaries are super cool. Like, and you can make room for some of those things depending on what your goal really is. Now, if your goal is really just, no, I want some quiet time to sit by myself and be with my thoughts, reading can become ancillary to that. Right. Right. But you could do other things as well. You don't actually have to have a book to sit quietly and get in touch with your thoughts. And so trying to sharpen your focus on what your resolution is really trying to get you to, I think is extremely important.
Yeah. I really think that just because of how much I listen to things, there's been a kind of a disservice a little bit because everything is so YouTube oriented nowadays, that people who drive, there's really we've been talking a little bit more about audio education, because I
Yeah.
get you know, 6 hours in a
Mhm.
car, just things that I'm interested in listening to, has been a really good thing. I'm
Yeah.
an oratory learner. I that's I've always my dad was kind of crippled with arthritis, and when he stopped being able to do things around the house, he used to have to talk me through if we had like an emergency, of a
Gotcha.
pilot flame went out or whatever. So
Yeah.
I began to be a really good listener. So
Yeah.
I and being a musician and everything like that, a lot of that is also oratory. I mean, there's some physical things to it, but it's both. It's kind of fine motor skills along with listening.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are built that way. And
I do too.
so if that's one thing I always said, you know, I'm somebody said, well, you're an author. And I said, well, I'm more of I'm more of an audio author.
Yeah.
I like public speaking. I like doing those things. I've been in radio and media for a long time, but it is this kind of conversation that I tend to it tends to stimulate my brain.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, creativity is a great example, right? If your goal, if you're saying to yourself for your New Year's resolution, you want to be more creative, let's say. And
Right.
just like what you said, well, people say you're an author. Well, or I'm more of an audio author. Well, your outlet for creativity is more in the audio setting. It's more in the media setting.
Right.
My daughter loves to paint, right? I was more of a drawer when I was in high school, like pen and ink or pencil. I really
Mhm.
enjoy doing that. She doesn't enjoy that, but
Right.
she'll sit and paint just to relax and, do that. And that's great. Right.
Hmm.
And so I think that, as we sharpen these ideas of what exactly are we resolved to do,
Right.
right, we start to find our niches. And so we just want to make sure that we're not narrowing, artificially narrowing what we're trying to do by
Yes.
defining that medium too tightly.
Right.
And, again, to sort of return to the workouts, I'm not built for yoga.
Mhm.
I just, it's, my wife and I have done it a few different times. It's always comical to me. I find the instructors some really funny. But I actually, there's a funny story. So we had a yoga instructor at the old personal training gym that I worked at, and she was going to miss class. And so there's all these people there for yoga. And my boss kind of says, "Hey, James, do you think you could run this yoga class?" And I'm like, I can try. I mean, I'm nowhere near built for yoga, but I
Right.
can lead people through a stretch session if that's what you want. So, I kind of faked it. There was no deep breathing. There was no, I'm sure it wasn't anywhere near as light and fluffy as they were used to. But the point is, it can be a good way to get in shape. You leave all the spiritual junk at the door, but it can be a good way to get in shape, right? It's just not one that I happen to choose, right?
Right.
Some
Right.
people
Right.
run
Right.
marathons, some people bike triathlons or whatever they do, right? I'm just a sort of a gym rat. I love lifting weights. And so none of those are better or worse necessarily, but they need to be
Hmm.
fitted to who you are. They need to be actually benefiting you. And I think once you find one that you actually enjoy, it's much
Right.
easier to go, move toward that resolution, right? If I
Yeah.
hate being on the
Right.
treadmill and I say, well, I want to get in better cardiovascular health, and I've got, the choice between a rower and a treadmill. I hate the treadmill. I should not choose the treadmill. That's crazy,
Right.
right? So we've got to figure out in and of ourselves, what is it that we really love?
Hmm.
And, for you, it might not be sitting down and writing, right? For me, it might be.
Right.
There's no problem with that. Like, we can both exercise creativity in different ways.
Right.
I would just say the other thing that I have found really helps me is, and this is a simple one, just interpersonal accountability. I think
Hmm.
particularly if people are trying to kick a bad habit, right?
Yes, right.
Um, and obviously not, I'm not thinking in terms of, heavy addiction, like alcohol addiction or drug addiction or
Hmm.
something like that. But if they're just trying to kick a bad habit,
Hmm.
um, I've always been a big fan of well, I'll give the story. When I was trying to lose weight, right, I lost about 50 pounds, 2016. And, my family did it along with me. It's not like they lost 50 pounds too. But the reality was they couldn't keep all the junk food and that, all the stuff that I wasn't supposed to eat in the house and expect that I wasn't going to eat it too.
Right.
And so they were sort of on the journey with me,
Oh, that's
which
nice.
was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that that sort of community, that interpersonal accountability, that, hey, I'm trying to stop X,
Hmm.
right? And then having the people in your life around you say, that's cool. We'll make sure that we're not tempting you to do X, or, we'll stop doing X for a time too. So, if it's smoking, right, you can imagine if you're trying to stop smoking and you live in a house with another smoker,
Hmm.
that's going to be challenging,
Yeah.
right? When I was trying to lose weight, and if there had been Oreos sitting out or something I really enjoyed eating, I don't know. It's not Oreos, but there are certain meals that it's hard for me to pass up on.
Right.
And if those had been around, regularly, I wouldn't have passed up on them.
Gotcha.
I'm a
All
sucker
right.
for a hot pretzel. Like I love
Yeah.
hot pretzels. And
Oh, I
so,
do too. Yeah.
if my son was eating hot pretzels every night and I'm like salivating over them, I'm probably not going to skip them. But he didn't. And so I think that there's a sense in which we need to have sort of a community of people around us to say, look, I'm trying to do this. I could use some help. Is there any way you could help me achieve
Right.
this resolution? In other words,
Hmm.
resolutions aren't just individual things. They're usually a bit communal.
Right. That's good. It is good to have the support, and that's kind of what family's about. It's what community's about, even in that way. And so you know we we try to help each other in a lot of ways, and that's the way it's designed, and
Yeah.
you're going to be successful, and they're going to be successful, and it might not be the same way, but it is that way.
Right.
I just still haven't got over the image of you teaching yoga, but that's I was
I don't
I
think
was just
anybody
thinking,
has really.
nose
Yeah.
in, breathe in,
Oh man, it was the
out,
roughest yoga
out.
session anybody's ever had. I knew like
Yes.
three moves. I think we did some walking lunges in there. I mean, it was
Oh yeah,
it was the yeah, it was the absolute oddest yoga session you'd ever want to be to. So
but it wasn't
it
videotaped, right? So
I think they ended up giving the session away for free.
okay.
But at least they got a workout in, and I think that was the whole goal. So
Yoga by Dr. James Spencer.
yeah, yeah. I knew we had Pilates in house too, and I was like, never Pilates. I don't even understand what's happening there. Um,
Yeah, I was just
so
reading something on Joseph Pilati, the Italian uh, guy
yeah, yeah,
who came up with Pilates. A very interesting
yeah.
story, and there were some actors that were involved in the very early Pilates, and they actually studied with Joseph Pilati, and I thought, wow, that'd be interesting. So, not
Yeah, I
that
mean,
I don't do Pilates. So.
I think, honestly, I think part of the reason that I like weight training and part of the reason that I wanted to have this conversation about New Year's resolutions,
Right,
weight training always lends itself to progress. Like
right.
you either add weight or you add reps or you
Hmm.
add sets, you add something as you're moving.
Right.
And so it's always a progressive movement. There's very seldom a time when you're sitting back and you say, well, I'm just going to maintain at this level, and you never have to progress again.
Hmm.
Even maintenance usually requires some level of progression. And I
Right.
think it's a great analogy then to how people can progress in their daily lives, finding
Yes.
something that they want to get rid of because it's hindering what they're doing, and
Hmm.
finding something they want to replace that hindrance with, that they're resolving to do. I think weight training is always a really great example of that versus something like yoga, which I don't like stretching at all. But it's not as intuitive to me how you see progress in yoga. In other
Right.
words,
Right.
I'm sure there is progress in yoga. I'm not saying that, but in the weight room, you put an extra plate on, you
Hmm.
do an extra rep, you do an extra set, you do an extra exercise. Like you know exactly what you're doing.
Yes.
Yoga, it feels like, yeah, I'm getting more flexible and I can see how flexible it is, but there's not a real objective measurement there. Right? It's more
Hmm.
about feel. And I've
Right.
always liked that sort of tangibility of the weight room, where you can actually feel things happening. And that's what I'd encourage people to do as they're thinking about their New Year's resolutions. It's a question of setting yourself up for success. And I think, like I said, part of that is making sure you're ready to actually implement the resolution, right?
Hmm.
Don't do it on January 1st after you've been up all night,
Right.
right?
Right.
Not a great time for you to have resolve on anything. It's more a good time for you to take a nap. Um, and so unless you're resolving to nap more, January
That
1st may not be your best day
I'm going to take
to
more
start.
naps this year. That's
That's
right.
right. But do that. Take it in small chunks, like progress small, right?
Hmm.
Minimum standards. If you can allocate 15 minutes and you'll always get that 15 minutes in, boom, that's where you start. And
Right.
you can progress up from there and then get some help,
Hmm.
enlist people to come. I've lifted on my own for a lot of years. Now my daughters like to lift weights, and it's super fun to have them in there with me. I mean,
Great.
I
Yeah.
don't, I'll have them spot me occasionally, but I mean, that's not really
Hmm.
what it's about. It's more just about having the camaraderie in the weight room. And,
Hmm.
on nights when I don't really feel like doing it, I can say, hey, girls, you want to work out? And they're all up for it. And so we'll go down and work out. And then I'm in the weight room. And what do you do in there? You just lift stuff. And
Right.
so, it's been helpful to have that little mini home community to go down and get the workouts in. It's definitely
Yes.
held me
Right.
more accountable. So I think don't be shy about asking for help. Don't be shy about getting other people involved in what you're doing and having them help you implement your resolution.
Yeah. That's great. I really like that. I was reading a little bit in one of my other shows about cognitive behavioral therapy,
Sure.
and that is increments.
Yep.
That is building a system, moments
That's right.
that you can say, "Boy, how can I become? How can I practice more humility?" And
Yeah.
you do the little steps to do that.
That's right.
You kind of take on a service orientation
Mhm.
of what you're doing. It's the same thing with just about anything. If you took cognitive behavioral therapy and you just put flowcharts together or steps on how you're going to do that, maybe that's the way we should be doing resolutions. And I think that gets back to our original conversation here.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think even within our own spiritual lives, and people may seem like this sounds like too behaviorist, right? I don't believe Christianity is about changing just our behavior. It's about
Right.
a total transformation. But
Exactly.
I I personally believe that you don't get that transformation until you're actually trying God.
Mm.
So, that Malachi 3:10 verse we've talked about multiple times, where
Right. Yeah.
God
No, I
tells the
love that. Yeah.
Israelites, test me, see what happens if you obey me. Just
Hmm.
test me.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that in the Christian life, we need to be taking small steps of obedience, even if we don't understand what this is going to do or how God's going to affect it. Like, I think obedience a lot of times doesn't make sense,
Right.
right? On the sort of meta level, it always makes sense, right? I mean, God is the sovereign of the universe. He's more relevant than anything we could ever face. And so obeying him makes perfect sense on that level.
Right.
But in the tedium of our lives, obedience often seems to take us off course,
Hmm.
right? And it seems to be like the meandering way around a problem, let's say.
Yeah.
So, but
Right.
I think we don't really understand and know God as deeply until we start obeying him. And
Hmm.
that requires us just to do something, to really trust God with something, and to test him in the way that he's calling Malachi, calling people to test him in Malachi.
Yeah.
It's not about, okay, God, when Satan tempts Jesus to jump off the temple so that the angels will catch him, right? Jesus says, no, you're not to test the Lord your God.
Right.
But I think that the way Jesus lived his life was a constant demonstration that he trusted God.
Right.
And he trusted God by obeying God.
Yep.
And so we need to do that same kind of thing. That to me is the real kicker. And when we think about it from a cognitive behavioral sort of standpoint, that's where we end up needing to be. We need to recognize that some of these small behaviors that we would implement time over time,
yes,
are going to give us a different vision of the way God moves and acts in our lives. And that's really important, I think, for our spiritual growth.
Well, I want to close with one that the Apostle Paul gave us, and that's that daily activity of renewing the mind. And Romans 12, that's one that I have tried to practice. I wish I did it on a daily basis. But wow, that is test God on that one, and see what happens. I think that's a good way to take that Malachi verse and bring it into our everyday lives. And that goes back to our prayer, and that goes back to our prayer life anyhow, and all of those things that renewing the mind. And really on the word. So I'm really looking forward to this 30-day in the Gospels, and then going to Acts again. We're taking them in increments. We're not it's not the fire hose.
That's right.
So I thank you for that, James, and this has been a good show. I'm all ready for the new year.
Got your resolutions ready for January 15th, right?
I do, yes.
New Year's-ish.
New Year's-ish, which I like that. I think we should all celebrate New Year's-ish.
Well, very good. And, this has been a great conversation. So appreciate you having it with me. And folks out there listening, thanks for tuning in to Thinking Christian. We'll catch you on the next episode. Just want to take a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on the Thinking Christian podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
Is life feeling chaotic? I get it. I'm Rachel Wojo, host of the Untangling Life podcast. Don't miss the passionate encouragement and faith-based resources you need to help you clear your head and calm your heart. As Shell says, it feels like Rachel always knows what I need to hear. She keeps it real and is so humble. Her podcast is just the cherry on top. Enjoy Untangling Life with Rachel Wojo on lifeaudio.com or your favorite podcast app now.